We need to talk about ideas, good ones and bad ones. We need to learn stuff about the world. We need an honest, intelligent, thought-provoking, and entertaining review of what the hell happened on this planet in the last 7 days. We need to sit back and listen to the Iron Fist and the Velvet Glove.
Oh, I'm not so sure you need to know what happened in the last 7 days, dear listener, or learn more about the world, because it just gets increasingly depressing as we catalogue the demise of civilization here on the Iron Fist and the Velvet Glove, back from a long break, but having visited
the
Vietnam.
Socialist Republic of Vietnam.
Yes, Scott the Velvet Glove, welcome back.
G'day, Trevor. G'day, Joe. G'day, listeners. I hope everyone's doing well.
Welcome back, Comrade Scott. So,
I don't think I'm comrade, but it's I had my respect.
You voted
for
Greens
Ho Chi
last
Minh.
time?
I did vote Greens because I had no choice.
Good one, Joe. And that is Joe, the tech guy. Good one.
That was only in the House of Representatives. I would never trust them in the Senate, but anyway. Yes, I had an increasing respect for Ho Chi Minh before this trip, and I came back away from it with an incredible respect for the man, because the one thing he wanted was an independent Vietnam, and he never got to live to see it. But anyway, it's and the whole thing should have been sorted out in 1953 after the French got their ass kicked at Dien Bien Phu, but then the Yanks got involved, and then it just fell apart from there.
And as we were discussing just before going live, all it required was the Yanks just to mind their own business and leave people alone.
Exactly. Had they stayed out of it, had they stayed out of it, it would have been fine. And Ho Chi Minh, when he first went on a tour of America and everything else, when he was trying to get rid of the French, he went on a tour of the Americans and to America, and he said to the Yanks, "You want us to be a liberal capitalist democracy. We will be a liberal capitalist democracy. All we want is your help to get rid of the French."
Yes.
And that should have been enough for them, but apparently it wasn't.
Yeah, can't have some uppity
Colonial.
developed country getting rid of its colonial oppressors. That would set a bad precedent.
So, let's face it, it was only 15 years earlier, before the Yanks got involved in the war, that they had been telling the British that they had to dismantle their empire. They were going all around the planet telling them that they had to get out. But for some reason, a French empire was sacrosanct. I just don't understand that. Anyway.
Yeah. Anyway, well, we're going to talk about, we're supposed to talk about news and politics and sex and religion, all the things you're not supposed to talk about at a dinner party. We probably won't get to the sex part. I don't think there's anything on the agenda along those lines. But what are we going to talk about so that you get an idea, dear listener, of the agenda? Well, of course, Gaza, Israel, Jews, Palestine, Israeli Defence Force, all that sort of stuff we're going to talk about. In particular, what happened at a Glastonbury, at a...
Music
festival, and really discuss, it's the amount of coverage that's had, particularly in the UK, where people are outraged by the death to the IDF chant, and the amount of space it's had in newspapers and time spent on television panel shows. Somebody chanting something about the IDF has had far more coverage than the actual genocide being committed by the IDF. Yeah. This is the incredible dystopian world we are in. Orwell couldn't have written this, or maybe he could have. It would have been right up his alley. This is the world we're in, and it's quite shocking, I think. So shall we kick off with that one, Scott? I mean... Death to the IDF was the chant. And
well, hang on. So the BBC in their wisdom decided that Kneecap, who are a Gaelic rap band, if I remember correctly, were too controversial to broadcast. So they cut over to some group that we'd never heard of called Bob Vylan, who then led the crowd in a chant of death to the IDF.
Yeah. And of course, this has been seen as anti-Semitic, but it's quite specific, IDF being the Israeli Defence Force.
Yes, and it's not even necessarily the people in it. It could be the organisation.
Indeed, indeed. An organisation which is on the record openly stating genocidal intent, and there is
Committing genocide too.
mountains of evidence demonstrating that's it. So if during the Second World War, towards the end, people had chanted "death, death" to the, what was the name
SS.
of the SS or something, people would have gone, well, fair enough. Like,
Yeah, exactly.
we're reaching that point, folks, where these guys are, the latest. Well, as I'm preparing the agenda for this podcast, and, okay, fair enough, it's been 2 weeks, but you just start going through the things that are happening over there, and, of course, the starvation that we predicted, what everyone predicted, is just ongoing. Now they've got these aid stations controlled by a wacko Christian group out of America, where it's like something out of Squid Games, where people are being shot as they attempt to get bags of flour. And this isn't an accident. And we've got we've got contractors working with the Israelis who are saying, yeah, they're just shooting people. And
Sky News had an interview with a member of the IDF who was a reservist, who was saying, we're getting orders, we don't know whether we're supposed to be arresting these people or shooting these people. The orders change all the time depending on who's in charge at the particular moment. There's an invisible line of control that the Palestinians aren't supposed to cross.
Yes.
And if they do, depending on what the commander feels like at this particular moment, we either arrest them or we shoot them.
And just, baby formula is being restricted or denied into Gaza, so infant babies are just dying of starvation. If you look anywhere on social media, you can just see the most horrendous images of children begging for food. They're scrawny, their ribs are sticking out. They're just in a terrible state.
It's exactly the same. It's exactly those pictures that motivated the world to feed Africa.
Yeah, it's
in the
so
80s.
It's so openly documented, and yet when people are protesting this, they're the ones being investigated by police and thrown in jails, and the people committing it are given a scot-free ride.
Did you hear about Palestine Action?
Where the UK was prescribing it as a terrorist organisation.
Correct, and then arrested a 83-year-old former priest whilst she was protesting, holding up a sign saying, I support Palestine Action. So Palestine Action are a direct action group who have vandalised, basically sprayed paint. So they broke into an RAF base and sprayed paint into the engines of a couple of refuelling tankers. And have attacked, spray painted messages, and I think broke a fuse box on the factory that was making parts that were being sent off to the IDF, a few other things. So they have been listed as a proscribed organisation, which basically means that you can face up to 14 years in jail for supporting them or encouraging people to join them.
It's Orwellian. It is incredible that we've reached this point. And, it's mind-boggling. And yet when as you know, for my sins, I subscribe to, say, the Courier Mail. For weeks, months, years, nothing about these atrocities going on. Nothing. And yet a firebombing of a Jewish synagogue
in Melbourne.
And demonstrators at a Jewish restaurant, and wall-to-wall coverage. It's insane that these incidents. The first 10 pages should be about the atrocities going on in Gaza, and then a byline about what's going on in Australia, and then a more measured sort of understanding of why these things are happening. So, for example, the restaurant, one of the owners is connected with the group that is involved in these strange aid centres where people are getting killed in Squid Games. So there's a connection there where people are quite possibly protesting against that Zionist involvement rather than Jews in general.
Mm-hmm.
And then the other one, who knows what the story is there? We've already seen false flag incidents in relation to that caravan.
Well, Netanyahu got on the blower, didn't he?
Yes, straight away.
Mm-hmm.
The Australian government needs to do this. It's an outrage, etc. But it could easily be some sort of false flag. Who knows? One lone person doing something. Who knows? So it's I just find the whole thing quite extraordinary. So let me see here. Just some of the notes that I might have. We sort of described that. Let's just play a little clip of the sort of debate that's going on in Great Britain at the moment over this sort of thing.
Start by saying, I do not endorse what Bob Villan said. I think the chant has just helped nobody. It was just a really stupid thing to do. I understand why there's a lot of anger, but let's just talk about Lisa Nandy here and Keir Starmer and just this incredible selective outrage, which I find impossible to stomach, right? She finds it in her heart to rush to Parliament, to stand up, to question and demand answers from a BBC allowing this streaming of this band, making this chant. She doesn't rush to Parliament to demand answers and concrete action on the actions that we are seeing live streamed to us daily of the IDF who are committing alleged war crimes at the direction of their Prime Minister Netanyahu, who has an arrest warrant out for, again, war crimes.
Is that, hang on, let's just get I hear you, and I understand what you're saying completely. Annunziata, what's your response to that? How can someone be outraged about villain and not outraged about people being shot up in food queues?
It is a very different thing to call for the deaths of our allies' armed forces. That is going against our country's interests, and it is calling for people to be killed.
But the IDF are snipering children in the head.
Whether you like it or not, Marina,
just listen to me.
Israel are one of our allies.
So if they're because they're our ally,
hang on, Marina, just one sec. Let Annunziata say her thing.
There are still hostages being held from a festival not dissimilar to Glastonbury, standing for peace, where the people attending were attacked, killed, raped, and taken hostage.
All right, Marina, let Marina talk.
But I'm sorry, children are paying the price. And are we saying that because they're our allies, we have to stand by as they sniper kids in their head?
And Hamas are using the humans in Gaza as human shields. They're using the people and the children.
Let me just show you Let me show you the latest on this. Hang on a second. I know how.
That gives you a bit of a flavour of the sort of arguments. The argument that Hamas are using the prisoners as human shields doesn't make sense, because clearly the Israelis are not paying any attention to them. It's not like for 1 minute they've gone, well, we won't bomb that place because we think one of our prisoners is there. Like, it's impossible to use these people as a human shield.
This isn't collateral damage. This isn't, oops, I was shooting at a terrorist and the bullet missed.
Yes.
This is, I'm deliberately shooting at people walking down the street.
Yep. I'm deliberately shooting doctors and nurses because I know they're treating Palestinians. I'm deliberately shooting journalists because I know that they're reporting on what we're up to. And I'm deliberately shooting kids because I don't want them growing up to be adults. It's not about shooting at Hamas. The argument of human shields is complete nonsense, because never once have they stopped, supposedly because of a human shield. And this argument that, well, they're our allies. Well, then they just shouldn't be your allies. When your allies are doing shit like this, you say, well, we don't want you as an ally anymore. Or
at the very least, you should be calling them out on it.
Yes. Friends tell friends when they're being pricks. allies should tell allies
when they're being
pricks, or when they're committing, I don't know, genocide. Just, where's our morality got to in the world when somebody can... She's the sister of Rees Mogg Jones or whatever, somebody like that. Like, just such upper class
Jacob
English.
Rees Mogg?
Yes, I think that woman is his sister. But just finding people who will get onto these panels and spruik the Israeli side. There's no shortage of them, which I find
it's one
incredible.
Of those things. It is really disturbing, actually, that you do have people like that are prepared to stand up and say this sort of nonsense.
Yeah.
It makes absolutely no sense to me.
Yeah. So, what else have we got to say here? Just the misplaced outrage that is going on over these chants compared to the lack of outrage in relation to the genocide itself. Yeah. Incidentally, guys, apparently the Israelis have a march that they do through Jerusalem regularly, calling for the death. Yes. It's a regular sort of thing, but calling for the death of... No, I've got to be sure what I'm saying here. I'll leave that one till I know the exact wording. So, a video has come out which the BBC was supposed to air but did not. And let me just see what it's called. Documentary, Gaza's Under Attack. Have you guys heard of this?
Is this the one with the famous interviewer? Because they've taken down at least 3 documentaries recently.
This one also has new footage, I think, of the IDF soldiers raping a Palestinian prisoner. But the BBC refused to air it. And our ABC won't air it. And in the show notes, dear listener, I'll have a link to where you can watch that. So I have yet to see it, but people say it's quite compelling.
Louis Theroux was who I was thinking of. And there's another documentary that was taken down that I've got an archive of.
Yeah. I don't think this was Louis Theroux, but...
Okay. Louis Theroux and the Settlers, I think it's called.
Yes, I've seen that one.
Okay.
That's very good. Yeah. Because that one, he gets the settlers themselves. It's their own admissions about
absolutely
their craziness. So yeah. Right. What else have I got here? Of course, I mentioned journalists get bombed. There was a cafe which was just full of journalists. And the reason was that it was one of the few places with semi-reliable internet. And the Israelis just dropped a bomb on it and killed scores of journalists. Like, they're targeting doctors and journalists because of the bad publicity that they get from these people. And what's that?
Were they Arab journalists that were killed, or were they
internationals? Yeah.
So there probably would have been some Europeans amongst that were killed too.
Yeah. The UN Special Rapporteur, Francesca Albanese, no relation to our Albanese, she produced a 28-page report to the Human Rights Council basically documenting how corporations are involved in the genocide and how one of the reasons why this is continuing is because it's profitable for so many companies to be promoting the whole exercise that Israel's on. So she names and shames a whole bunch of corporations, many of them US-based. I'll give you one guess of what the US response was.
Put her on a watch list.
She should be sacked from her role with the UN, and all of our US companies are perfectly fine. Thank you very much. That was So that was the the answer there. Does our government make any comment on it? Not at all. Yep, not at all.
It's also in Netanyahu's interest because apparently he's up for bribery charges that can't be happening whilst he's
Prime
Minister. And whilst there's a war on, he can't step down from being Prime Minister.
No, it's one of those things, like that's why they reckon those right-wing nut jobs in his cabinet have got so much power, because all they've got to do is threaten to walk away, which will end up collapsing the government, which means he's out of office, which means he's subject to criminal prosecution.
Yes. One of those right-wing nutters, Merav Ben-Ari, she said, the children in Gaza brought it upon themselves.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
How'd they bring it upon themselves?
Well,
by being Palestinian.
It's like the
choosing to be
who were raped by Catholic priests. They seduced the priests,
Yes. They brought it upon themselves. Yeah. Oh, dear. I mean, you see just some terrible things on Twitter. Just terrible things. One is just a guy walking down an alley, a street, like every building in the street is just rubble almost. He's got a sack of flour over his shoulder as he's trudging down the street. He's totally alone. You're watching him there, and all of a sudden, there's just this massive explosion because they've just dropped a bomb on him, and he just disintegrates into 1,000 pieces.
Well, he had automatic weapons hidden in the bag of flour. They couldn't be sure.
Yeah.
Well, assuming any of these Palestinian kids do grow up, those that aren't maimed, they're going to be the first ones joining Hamas, and they're going to be indoctrinated in Hamas, and they're going to take the Hamas lead, and all Israel has done is just created the next generation of terrorists. And it's been going on for, how old's Israel? 80 odd years. And it's just, the one time they actually got close to it was when the Prime Minister who was assassinated, Rabin, when he actually had those talks with the Palestinians, and the Oslo agreements and everything else when they were signed, and he actually started to work towards a two-state solution. That was the only time that there was any sort of hope. But because he was assassinated by that nutter, the whole thing fell over.
With the whole coverage of this, like I always expect the worst of the Murdoch press and what used to be the Fairfax press and Kerry Stokes' mob and the New York Times and those. But I kind of expected or hoped for better from groups like the BBC and the ABC. And they're just as bad.
It makes me wonder whether or not the politicians have got them on a very short lead and just telling them you can't actually say that.
Well, in the BBC, the evidence was that the sort of editorial control from within the BBC was basically by a sort of a pro-Zionist guy who was completely dominating what coverage came out. Nothing could be printed or said on the BBC about Gaza without his approval. And here in Australia, we haven't had a similar all-encompassing guy in charge, but there was the original sort of direction. You can't use the genocide word, for example. And that journalist Latouf, who was just had 3 shifts left and got sacked by the ABC because she posted on Twitter on her own private account something supportive of the Palestinians, and eventually
I think it said something genocide, and she said, well, that was in our report.
Referring to a genocide in a UN report or something.
Yeah.
And the ABC sacked her. And, of course, that's gone through the courts, and she's since, in the last week, come out with a victory. So our own ABC public broadcaster couldn't be fair and impartial in relation to this. And even, if you watch the 7:30 report or listen to Late Night Live, you would have heard Laura Tingle talking. She's like the employee representative on the board, and she was in favour of the sacking. So, my God,
got to go with groupthink.
Our media is just terrible. And that's just on Gaza, of course. Like, don't get me started on the ABC and its reporting of China, but we'll get onto that another time. But I don't know, guys. I mean, I'm ready to move on to the disunited states of America. Unless you had any other tales of woe to give about Gaza, but it's in the chat room, Alex says, time to unfriend the baby killers. Yeah, we don't need allies like that. It's just, You know, you see old Labor guys like Doug Cameron making comments saying, what's happened to my Labor Party? What are we doing? Why is Albanese not doing something? Blah, blah, blah. Like, guys like him would still have the ability to get on the phone and talk to people like Albanese. They're obviously just not able to cut through to these guys and tell them, you are mad. You are against public sentiment. What are you doing? No cut through. Like, just... Yeah, it's as if there's an Epstein file on every single one of them or something.
Well, no, there's no Epstein file on anybody.
No, apparently. Otherwise, Elon would have released it if there was.
No. But Kash Patel and whatever other conspiracy theorist who's now second in charge of the FBI have come out and gone, nothing to see here. Honestly, move along.
Oh, in that case, all good. Yeah. So, Elon, who's had a fallout with Donald Trump.
And that has been beautiful to watch, hasn't it?
He's decided he's going to start a new political party.
Yes.
He spent a long time to think about the name, and he called it America Party.
It's one of those things. He must understand that because they don't have preferential voting, all it's going to do is destroy the Republicans' hopes, isn't it?
We can only hope.
Yes. The shovel came out.
That's assuming that there's going to be an election anytime soon.
Good point, yes.
Yeah. They're pesky, those elections. Yeah. The shovel came out with the headline, Clive Palmer buys Australian Electoral Commission rights to America Party for next Australian election. I wouldn't be surprised. Yeah. New York Mayor, Democrat nominee, Zoran Mamdani. Donald Trump's not happy about him.
No, he's trying to revoke his citizenship.
Yes. So, in his
Why? Because he's left-wing?
Because he's a social democrat. Because he wants to tax rich people, particularly rich people in New York City, of which Donald Trump, if he ever leaves the White House, will be one.
And I'm pretty sure he's one of those brown people as well. So
he was born in Africa, I think, somewhere.
So Donald Trump said that he should be arrested, deported, denaturalized. So, and in a tweet, President Trump says, as President of the United States, I'm not going to let this communist lunatic destroy New York. Rest assured, I hold all the levers and have all the cards. I'll save New York City and make it hot and great again, just like I did with the good old USA. Can we talk about the failure of democracies, Scott?
Yeah, he's completely delusional. And I just don't understand what was going through the Americans' head, because like my friends over there are absolutely appalled at the shit he's coming out with. But then there are others that still love him, and I just don't understand why.
Well, because he's keeping brown people out.
Well, that must be the only thing that he's actually doing, because it's just...
He's trading on their fears that have been created by a propaganda machine.
Well, and also he's stopping the flow of fentanyl.
Yes, another fear.
From Canada.
Yeah.
Yeah, I know, and that was ridiculous too, because they had they did the numbers and that sort of stuff, and it was less than half of 1% of the total fentanyl was coming across their border, wasn't it?
Probably.
Yeah.
And also, don't forget, he's introduced tax cuts.
Yeah.
I mean, say what you like, Scott, about authoritarian regimes, But there's no way they would allow a nincompoop like Donald Trump to get in charge.
No.
They've allowed Vladimir Putin to stay in charge.
Yeah, but he's not a nincompoop.
No, he's not an idiot.
Have you seen the new budget? ICE has a bigger amount of money to spend than the Russian army.
Really?
No, really.
Yep. So the number of dollars is greater than the Russian army just for ICE, not for any other law enforcement department.
So, brown people turn up to standard court cases of different types, and then as they
Get
exit
black-bagged.
and enter the hallway, there's a bunch of ICE agents there, and these guys are wearing masks. No identification of who they are. They could be just some sort of criminal gang.
And this has already happened.
Yes. And they take these guys and shuffle them into the elevator and off they go.
Some people have said this is very much like the Sturmabteilung.
Which was
that was
Hitler's
a German thing.
brown shirts.
Right.
So
The
his
SA.
private army,
Yes.
the SA, that died in the Night of the Long Knives.
Yeah.
Well, their leadership died in the Night of the Long Knives,
yes.
but most of them were then sent over to the army and everything else.
Yeah, absorbed.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's basically Trump's private army of thugs.
Yes, it is.
Yeah. I mean, you see continuing stories of people being told not to travel to America now because they'll look at your phone and want to check your social media.
I'm not going to be
I
traveling
will
to
not
America.
travel.
Yeah. Yes.
I will not travel there until that bastard is out of ulcers.
Yeah. You'd be
I've
crazy.
actually said to one of my friends over there, I said, look, Brian and I are going to go to Canada next time. So if you want to come up to Canada and visit us there, that's no problem at all. But I am not going to cross the border into America. It's and there are all sorts of horror stories going on about. There was a woman that was turned around at the airport because she had too much baggage. She was already married to an American citizen, and she wasn't actually moving over there. She was just carrying bags over there. And they turned around because as far as they were concerned, you wouldn't arrive with so much luggage unless you were planning on moving there.
Right.
And she said, well, my husband's actually an American officer in the Navy.
Yes.
And they still turned around.
Yeah.
So I just don't understand where the hell it's coming from now. If this is the way they treat us, God knows how the hell they're treating people that don't look like us. I cannot understand why the hell anyone would ever want to travel to that country.
Well, if you're one of those illegal aliens, you'll end up in what was the term for the Alcatraz? Alligator Alcatraz.
Alligator Alcatraz, yeah.
For God's sake.
And people were saying, at least the SS weren't selling Auschwitz memorial T-shirts.
True. They had some standards. So, of course, the problem for the Americans' economy and the farming industry is you need these pesky brown people for picking the crops.
And for working in restaurants and for cleaning and for running your hospitals and for...
Exactly. It's just that...
So Trump was asked along these lines. Now, this particular clip, the sound isn't great. I hope the sound's good enough for it, but we'll just play a bit and see how it turns out.
The idea of finding some way to get farm workforce and service sector workforce. And I think you've discussed somehow a program of people leaving on a sponsorship and coming right back. Can you give us a little more detail about that and why, in the view of some hardliners, it's not amnesty?
Take care of our farmers and hotel workers and various other people, and we're working on it right now, and Ron's going to be involved, and you're involved already. So we have a lot of cases where ICE will go into a farm, and these are guys working there for 10, 15 years, no problem. The farmers know them. We're going to put, it's called farmer responsibility or owner responsibility, where they're going to be largely responsible for these people. And they know these people. They've worked on the farms for 15 years, and all of a sudden So I have a great, Ron does, Christie does, we have a great feeling for the farmer and for others in the same position. And we're going to give them responsibility for people. And we're going to have a system of signing them up so they don't have to go. They can be here legally. They can pay taxes and everything. They're not getting citizenship, but they get other things. And the farmers need them to do the work. Without those people, you're not going to be able to.
Yeah, so if the farmer vouches for them, or the owner...
yeah, exactly. The owner of them vouches for them.
if their master says they've been good little brown people and haven't been too uppity, then they'll be allowed to stay.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Did that sound like that?
That's exactly
I'm not exaggerating it.
That's exactly what it sounded like.
It did sound like they're bringing back slavery.
Exactly. And it's, he said, they're not going to be citizens.
No.
It's just that...
They'll be able to work on the farm picking that cotton.
Yeah.
Jesus
Christ. Anyway. For a country that has so much to be proud of, they've also got a hell of a lot to be ashamed of.
They're completely down
this idiot is just turning them backwards. He's taking them well beyond Lyndon Baines Johnson. He's taking them back further,
He is, though, just a natural progression of where the American experiment was always heading. And so it's not like he's sent it in a direction that it wasn't always going to go, the way things are set up over there. So maybe he's a bit of an accelerant, but yeah.
Well, I mean, yeah. I heard someone interviewed who said, what would you do if you were made president? And he went, the problem isn't the president. The problem is everything that allows the president to be elected and, all of the checks and balances that no longer exist, the Supreme Court that's just rubber stamping King Trump.
Yep, the system.
The Senate and the Congress that are rubber stamping King Trump. Yeah, everything is so corrupt. You need to tear it down and start again.
It's the same with Israel. You could get rid of Netanyahu and you could get rid of the entire cabinet. But the attitudes from polls that we've seen of the Israeli population is that you would end up with exactly the same type of people in charge again. It's systemic. It's not. It's not
people who complain about Trump. Biden had 4 years, admittedly with an unfriendly Congress, but at least 2 years that he could have pushed through a whole load of legislative changes to stop that happening again. Nothing happened.
I just think that Biden probably honestly didn't think that anyone would actually try and do what Trump has done.
Well, the fact that he attempted in the first place should have been enough to put up some steel walls around.
Yeah.
And he said what he was going to do.
Yeah.
None of this is a surprise.
Well, it is to the people who weren't paying attention, who were only listening to... But he says it like it is,
Yeah.
He says what I want to hear.
Yeah.
The fact that he's a lying con man.
Of course, never forget the influence of religion on this whole bunch. And
that's true.
And Scott, you've...
The whole abortion thing was a placeholder because they hated segregation. But they couldn't say they hated segregation because that would be being racist. So they had to dream up an excuse, and abortion was the excuse that they were using as a placeholder for segregation.
Yes. Yep.
So abortion may have been repealed, but don't worry, segregation will come soon.
Yeah.
It's one of those things like, the Loving versus whatever. Virginia.
Yeah.
I could actually see that being overturned.
Oh, absolutely.
Now, God knows how they're going to do that because Clarence Thomas is a black man that's married to a white woman.
But that's Loving versus Virginia. Wasn't that gay marriage, or was that?
No, that was
miscegenation?
That was interracial marriage.
Yeah, miscegenation. So he said that was the only one that he didn't want to repeal. Strangely enough.
Clarence Thomas.
Yeah, Clarence Thomas said, gay marriage was up for
it was up to be looked at again.
Yeah, and listed all these things. Strangely enough, Loving versus Virginia wasn't.
Oh, look, we're saying a lot of bad things, but we've got to remember it's a special country. It's very, very special. Just see, I'm going to show you how special they are.
Us our rights. See, the powerful thing about that is we're the first nation in the history of the world that acknowledged that our rights do not derive from government. They come from God himself.
Oh, for God's sake.
You see those words up there, that motto, it says, "In God we trust," right above the speaker's rostrum. You know, a previous Congress put that there in the early 60s in the height of the Cold War. There's a little visitor's guide that people get when you do tours late at night. You've probably seen your constituents and visitors and friends get the guide. If you turn, I think it's about to page 21. It explains why that's there. And it says, Congress voted to put that there as a rebuke to the Soviets' worldview at the height of the Cold War. Why? Because communism, socialism, find their root in Marxism. And Marxism begins with the belief that there is no God. It's wrong. And this Congress made a stand those many years ago, and we should do it again.
It's a good start.
We're different, we're distinct, we're exceptional, because we acknowledge that right there, our motto.
This is the Speaker of the House, by the way.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, what's his name?
Johnson, I think, something like that.
Yeah.
Well, he's a bit of a dick.
It doesn't say in government we trust.
He's a complete idiot.
It says in God we trust. And we better remember.
Of course, they replaced the original motto, which was E pluribus unum.
Out of many
come one. Because you wouldn't want to say that we're people from all nations and we are one united country. We have to be a theocracy instead.
Yeah. They've really got to change the name to the Disunited States of America, really.
Well, the Theocratic States of America.
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh, I just love there was something that I saw on Instagram.
Oh, hang on.
Scott disappeared.
Yeah.
Instagram just recently. It's
you disappeared just briefly, but it's like your internet got a little. But now you're back, so just start again.
I saw something on Instagram fairly recently. It was just a meme that was up there, and it said that A Handmaid's Tale was a work of fiction, not an instruction manual. You know, and it's just one of those things. And I said to you and your missus a little while ago, Trevor, I said, you know, I think that America was 2, possibly 3 bad decisions away from becoming the Republic of Gilead. And I think we've had those first 2 bad decisions.
2 or 3 elections.
Yeah, I know. Well, the first 2 bad decisions were the one that said that corporations could have opinions and that sort of stuff.
Oh, yeah.
And the second one was the
Citizens United.
Citizens United. The second one was the abortion case. And the third one will be if they actually allow Trump to go for a 3rd term.
This whole ICE agents just coming and abducting people and spiriting them away. That's straight out of that sort of dystopian nightmare.
Including American citizens who are lawyers representing people who've been up in front of the, what's it called?
The courts.
The migration court.
Right, yep.
There was a guy who was literally just grabbed by ICE agents and he's going, I'm an American citizen, what are you arresting me for? And they just refused to say anything and threatened anybody who tried to intervene.
Yes.
But didn't show any ID, didn't identify themselves. It was literally just black bag the guy.
Yes.
Disappear him off into detention somewhere.
See, this is why I will never travel. This is why I won't travel to the United States, why they've got this sort of garbage going on. And, you know, it's like we were saying off air, you know, I've begun to question the relevance of our alliance with them. You know, it's... Please
tell me you've gone more than that, Scott. Please tell me you've gone...
I've been questioning it for a long time, but now it's getting more and more serious because I don't think we can trust them anymore. You know, it's... I would have thought that over East Timor and that sort of stuff, that should have been enough for us to realise that the Yanks are not going to come down to our aid.
I've certainly heard that our intelligence agencies are being very, very circumspect about what information is being shared with.
Well, that doesn't surprise me at all. And I just think to myself, the Five Eyes Agreement, you could probably turn that into a Four Eyes Agreement, where you don't have the Yanks involved anymore. And that's one of those things that the Americans have done it to themselves. No one else has done it to them. They've done it to themselves. And, I just also find it ridiculous that Elon Musk is responsible for the space program now. He's a private contractor and everything else.
Yeah,
and
you wonder how much longer, because
I know, which is one of those things that if Trump decides to actually pull the funding from it,
Trump has said to Doge, why don't you look at all the money that Elon's getting if you want to save some government dollars?
But, the whole idea of small government is that you outsource things to the private enterprise who are far more efficient. So if you've got a space program
for it,
you've got to pay them, but of course you'd be paying them a lot less than if you had in-house public servants, fat cats that you had to pay. So,
those in-house public servants are responsible for the iPhone and everything else. It was.
Well, actually, they are.
Yes.
A lot of government-funded research went into the iPhone.
I know, it did.
Yes.
It's...
A lot of government-funded research ended up being given away for free for Apple to take the patents on and sue anybody who tried to copy it.
Exactly.
Yes, Maria Mazzucato or something like that.
Yes.
We did her at one stage, yeah. But I've lost track. I was going to say something there, but I've lost track.
You heard about the Texas floods?
Trump was playing golf at the time in Florida.
Immediately after Trump has cut the Federal Weather Service or whatever it was.
Yes.
And now they didn't have any warning of that floods were coming.
And he was asked about it.
Yep.
And asked whether his
pardon?
cuts...
Couldn't hear that.
No. You missed what he said.
Oh.
He said, that was Biden's fault. That was Biden's
program.
Oh,
okay.
He blamed Biden.
Of course he did. The more you hear about the big beautiful bill, where they've given tax cuts all around, although poor people will be getting absolutely nothing out of the tax cuts, but they've done it by increasing the federal deficit, which, as they say, means that everyone's going to be paying for it in the future. But probably, the first round of big impacts don't happen until after the midterm elections.
Which is, the whole sort of deficit thing was the reason that Elon Musk supposedly didn't like it.
Yes.
But I thought there was so much there for just the rich billionaire class in tax breaks.
No, he didn't like it because he wasn't allowed to have his pick for the head of NASA.
In the big beautiful bill?
Yeah, there was something about...
okay.
That's why he had his big meltdown, was because
something
he wasn't
personal
allowed to
like
pick
that.
Right. Yeah.
Nothing to do with the economics of it.
And then the big beautiful bill, I believe, was something to do with the fact that EVs were losing their federal funding, but the fossil fuel manufacturers weren't.
That would be it. That would make sense. That would make sense. So, yeah, that makes sense. Trump really wants a Nobel Peace Prize.
I know, and God knows why. He's
going to get one over the Iran-Israel war because he managed to stop it in its tracks.
He didn't stop it in its track. He bombed the Iranians.
Yeah, but that caused that. After that, there's peace. They came begging to him. They said, "Please, Mr. President, you're so wonderful. Please, can we have some peace?"
This is a genuine tweet from Donald Trump, which is
a tweet or a tweet.
Tweet. Well, it's a truth. A truth. Thank you. I am very happy to report that I have arranged, along with Secretary of State Marco Rubio, a wonderful treaty between the Democratic Republic of Congo and the Republic of Rwanda in their war, which was known for violent bloodshed and death, more so even than most other wars, and has gone on for decades. Representatives from Rwanda and the Congo will be in Washington on Monday to sign documents. This is a great day for Africa and, quite frankly, a great day for the world. I won't get a Nobel Peace Prize for this. I won't get a Nobel Peace Prize for stopping the war between India and Pakistan. I won't get a Nobel Peace Prize for stopping the war between Serbia and Kosovo. I won't get a Nobel Peace Prize for keeping peace between Egypt and Ethiopia. A massive Ethiopian-built dam, stupidly financed by the United States of America, substantially reduces the water flowing into the Nile River. And I won't get a Nobel Peace Prize for doing the Abraham Accords in the Middle East, which, if all goes well, will be loaded to the brim with additional countries signing on and will unify the Middle East for the first time in the ages. No, I won't get a Nobel Peace Prize, no matter what I do, including Russia/Ukraine and Israel-Iran, whatever those outcomes may be. But the people know, and that's all that matters to me.
Bullshit.
What? The ravings of a lunatic. And
a megalomaniac.
I read the fucking newspapers, and Trump demands that we increase our GDP, our defence spending, to 5% of GDP, and we need to prove our bona fides to Donald Trump, and Albanese should just say yes, and if we don't, we may not get our submarines as well. Like if you thought the submarine deal was bad, it's now, in order to get our submarines, not only do we have to pay the price of these, the ridiculous price for the submarines we're never going to get.
And also fund their shipyards.
Now we've got to actually increase our GDP defence spending. You just cannot believe it. And this stupid diabolical monster over there is making these demands, and our mainstream media here is going, well, we better do what Donald says, because you never know, maybe he won't be our friend anymore. We won't be able to rely on the Americans in the event that those horrible Chinese come and invade us.
It's just we've never been able to rely on the Americans anyway. They should actually, if they actually read answers, they would see that it says that there is no guarantee of support. There is only a guarantee that
there's no Article 5.
No, each country will go back and discuss it in terms of their own democracy. So it's
and
a
even
ridiculous
Article
thing.
5 is no guarantee. I'm sure Europe is going, we can't guarantee that America will defend us.
Which is why France is now talking about extending their own nuclear umbrella to protect all of Europe.
Yep.
The British nuclear umbrella they can't use without the Americans saying so, can they?
Well, there's questions about that. The Brits claim yes, but so basically the Trident missiles are leased from America and are rotated in and out. So they have to be maintained, so they get shipped off to America, and then refurbished ones come back. And so there's questions, because they're leased, as to exactly what the chain of command is to use those nuclear missiles.
And is that all the British have got, is it? Is Trident missiles for nuclear? Okay.
So they decided that it was more cost effective to enter a shared agreement with the Americans.
Yeah.
And the whole submarine-launched nuclear missiles was deemed as the most effective, because you could hide them anywhere in the ocean and launch them. And therefore they couldn't be taken out by a first strike. And so if we were doing that, then you might as well enter into a joint agreement with... the reason why America manages to outspend Europe, other than spending lots of money, is the fact that America is a single country, whereas the European Union / the rest of NATO all have their own defence departments who are all arguing for different things. And there is no overarching, we're buying 1,000 of these tanks, we're going to get a big discount, and then each country gets however many of that batch of 1,000.
No, it's one of those things. Like, I was very amused when I saw a tweet from a German guy who said, "Now I just want to get this straight. You want a German army to march and invade Russia?" You know, I just want to get this straight. You know,
yeah, through Poland or something like that.
Yeah, or go to Ukraine and invade Russia. You know, which is exactly what Hitler tried. You know.
Anyway, gentlemen, we have ranted about crazy Israelis and Zionists. We've ranted about a crazy media that is talking about the people who object to the genocide rather than the genocide itself. And we've ranted about a democracy in the United States of America which has produced a complete nutcase that we knew there was. I mean, we saw it all the first time. It's no surprise, but the way the system worked, that's what we ended up with. The only people talking sense in this world are authoritarian regimes, Scott, like China, who are denouncing what the Israelis are doing, sort of the global South, the South American, Latin American, Africa, Asia, basically outside of liberal Western democracies, they're the ones talking sense.
Yeah, I know.
So next podcast I'm going to talk about the China model, written by Daniel Bell, no relation, which examines basically Chinese democracy, which is sort of democracy at a local village level and a meritocracy at the top versus democracies, and whether lessons can be learned. So,
I think we should have Landon on for that.
Yeah, Landon Hardbottom, yes.
Yeah, so he's currently in Australia.
Is he? Oh, well, he'll have to listen to that one. Might be an audio-only one, that one. So, anyway, well, that's enough for this episode. You guys around next week? Scott, are you gallivanting around, visiting any other... if you visit many more of these communist countries, Scott, then you'll get a black mark on your passport. They'll be questioning you.
I'm not going to be able to go back into the United States anytime soon. So.
No. Doing this podcast has totally ruled you out.
It has, because I just think to myself that, if they're going to look at my social media and everything else, they're just not going to have me.
No.
Which is fine,
Yeah. Scott, if you were flying in a plane somewhere around the world and, we used to joke if we were flying over Iran and the plane, developed mechanical failure and had to land in an emergency situation in Iran, we'd be like, holy shit, we're going to be in trouble here. If the same happened in your flight to Canada, where you're going over America and there is a problem with the aircraft and has to do an emergency landing.
I could end up getting arrested.
Some of those wacky Middle East countries, I'd almost prefer to land than the United States of America under the current regime that is operating there. So, yeah. So, all right. Green Apple Cat said, thanks, guys. Thank you, Green Apple Cat. So, all right. We will be back next week cataloguing the further demise of civilization that takes place over the next 7 days. Until then, bye for now.
And it's a good night from me.
And it's a good night from him.
Good night.